Namaste, everyone. Welcome to the Cārvāka podcast. So first of all, I want to apologize. I was scheduled to start at 7:30 p.m. India time, but we are starting a little early. It's because today I am talking to the busiest man in Canada right now, Terry Milewski, my dear friend. Terry, welcome back.
Thanks. I'm glad to do your show. Yes, I'm getting quite a few calls right now. Yes, reasons that are obvious.
Yeah, and it's so sad because I mean, you know it. I've always looked up to you. I have nothing but admiration for you. I've always said Terry Milewski is one of my favorite Canadians, and it's a tragedy that because I look up to you so much that I only get to call you when Indo-Canadian relations are spoiled. I wish Terry and I could just do a normal chat about Canadian things and normal stuff, but it's just terrible. But Terry, last year we were around about talking that it can't get worse than this. But Terry, we have somehow managed to make it even worse. So,
Oh,
what
yes,
are
I
your
was on
thoughts
your
right now?
broadcast. I was on your broadcast saying it really they've reached rock bottom. They can't get worse than this. And sure enough, that's when they were exiling junior diplomats, throwing them out of the country, and now they've thrown out the top diplomats. There's nobody left.
So, Terry, today's podcast is not about what has happened. Today's podcast, let's focus on what we can
Yeah.
as I mean, you're a Canadian, I'm an Indo-Canadian, right? I'm half Indian because I literally live half of the time in India and half of the time in Canada. And this is out of genuine concern for two good nations, two democracies, two nations that should be building better relationships. And this is not the veteran journalist Terry Milewski and the Indian podcaster Kushalmehra. This is two people who care for this situation, and how do we maneuver out of it? So let's focus on that today. How do we maneuver out of it, Terry? That's what I want to talk to you about.
Well, this would be a bit of a long answer. By all means, cut in if I lose you. Both governments of good countries, sure. Both governments have completely and disastrously miscalculated the situation. In Canada's case, Canada has traditionally and still does completely miscalculated the impact upon India of Khalistani activists in Canada. And I'm going back all the way to 1982, Pierre Trudeau's decision not to extradite, not to agree to an Indian request directly from Prime Minister Indira Gandhi to extradite the man who 3 years later became the Air India bomber, the author of the worst mass murder in Canadian history. And going forward to the present, where now it's completely normal in Canada, unbelievably enough, it's completely normal in Canada for Vaisakhi parades to go through the streets of major cities in British Columbia and in Ontario, toting life-size glorification posters of martyrs and assassins, to include the author of the Air India massacre. Now we have trucks going through on Vaisakhi Day, going through Brampton, Ontario, with a life-size diorama of the assassination of Indira Gandhi, celebrating the assassination. This was a wonderful thing. Look, kids, we machine gunned her at her office. So Canada has completely miscalculated the anger that has been growing and growing and growing in India, and miscalculated the will of India to do something about it. That if we're not going to put a stop to this, or even disapprove of it at a minimum, then India is likely to do something about it. And we should have known that. Our intelligence services should have realized, Prime Minister, if you were to say, for example, that no politician from your party, from the governing party, the Liberal Party, should be present at such Vaisakhi parades or Martyrs' Day parades, then that would help. But no Prime Minister, not Conservative, not Liberal, has ever done that. Has stood up and said, "Excuse me, I'm not going to show up at your event to listen to cries of Khalistan Zindabad and the worship and glorification of martyrs. Now, so much for Canada. We can expand on that if you want later. But for India, they have completely miscalculated the extent to which they could get away with activities that broke the law in Canada. It's no use saying, no, we're innocent, we didn't do it. I'm sorry, but there's a mass of evidence now. The RCMP has made it clear that the killing of Hardeep Singh Nijjar in Surrey last year was part of a much larger Indian operation to harass and to manipulate its enemies in Canada. I personally have no problem with Indian diplomats, for example, that they're accused of gathering information. What are they supposed to? What do you think diplomats do? You know, if Canadian diplomats are not gathering information, we should fire them. So, you know, that's kind of absurd to include that in the indictment. Oh, they've been, well, using clandestine means to gather information. Well, there's no reason they shouldn't gather information. Now, India has miscalculated that it could get away with more and more and more, basically taking this out of the Canadians' hands. Then we're going to operate in Canada, and we're going to go after these people that we consider threats. And they became overconfident, it seems to me, and it seems to me now highly likely that they were indeed involved, not at an official level. I'm not saying that Modi knew, but that at a high level, I'm thinking Doval, Amit Shah, I'm thinking at a high level in the intelligence services, that there was some awareness, too much awareness perhaps, of the activities that led to ultimately to the assassination of Hardeep Singh Nijjar. I don't think the RCMP, which is non-political, made this all up. I don't think that CSIS made it all up. I do not believe Indian protestations that they never told, that Canada has never revealed the evidence to the Indian side. I believe that by now there have been at least 3 occasions when the RCMP, the CSIS, has briefed ministers, and those ministers have indeed laid evidence before their Indian counterparts to show what the Canadians have. Plus, in addition, you can say that, well, we've seen not a shred of evidence, is the Indian cry. Well, sorry, but much of it is public. And that's more than a shred. If you read the United States indictment of Nikhil Gupta, allegedly the handler, drug trafficker, weapons dealer, allegedly, according to the FBI and Department of Justice in New York, who have Gupta in custody now facing trial. According to them, this plot was part of the same plot as the Nijjar plot. So there was one plot targeting both Gopal Singh Pannu of Sikhs for Justice in New York and Hardeep Singh Nijjar in Surrey, British Columbia. So I don't think this is all invented. I think that the details in the American indictment show that there is actual evidence, wiretaps, good enough to convince a court that Gupta should be extradited, not from India, but from Czechoslovakia. They tricked him. Then they got him in the car when his plane landed in Czechoslovakia, and they used Face ID to get into his phone. They took his phone, held it up to his face, into his phone, saw his texts. Well, it's pretty, so they've got a lot of evidence. Anyway, I promised you a long answer, and it's been too long. But in summary, I'm saying that both governments have blown it. They've miscalculated the impact of what they've been doing for decades now. And it's grown and grown and grown out of public view to the point it's burst into public view as this diplomatic disaster. and now we're in a deep freeze. And now I think you're going to ask, well, how do we get out of this mess, right?
Yeah, not only how do we get out of this mess, but I find some of the details that the Canadians and the RCMP share very confusing. Um, the RCMP in its press conference says that the Indian government is actively courting the Lawrence Bishnoi gang to do a lot of this clandestine work. I mean, color me a little skeptical, Terry, as someone who has followed Indian politics and Indian elections and Canadian politics for a while too. That I know a little bit. I know a thing or two about the Lawrence Bishnoi gang. The Lawrence Bishnoi gang. Lawrence Bishnoi is right now in a jail in India, and Lawrence Bishnoi just 3 days ago, his shooters killed a BJP ally in the state of Maharashtra, in my own city of Mumbai. The politician's name was Baba Siddiqui. And Lawrence Bishnoi is known to kill many people. Just a couple of years ago, I mean, I don't have the copy of the dossier on me, but yes, I have read the dossier, official dossier that was sent to Canada, which had named 7 gangsters that are living freely in Canada. They have their addresses mentioned. The addresses are mentioned, and they are all 7 gangsters of the Lawrence Bishnoi gang. So I mean, color me a little skeptical, where the RCMP says that Indian government is actively hiring Lawrence Bishnoi, while the Indian government is actively telling them, send us these gangsters back. I just don't, the facts of the case don't add up. On the
It
other
doesn't
hand, of
add
the
up. You're right.
the Americans, on the other hand, I will credit the Americans. The Americans showed actionable evidence in their case. What I see with the Canadians is that the Five Eyes network tends to listen to a lot of chatter, and the Americans passed on the chatter to the Canadians. And the Prime Minister of Canada, in his wisdom, basically threw everything under the bus. Now it's a giant problem, but still, how do we solve this now? Because at the end of the day, these are two democracies. I mean, and I know America is going to try to solve this problem, because even now, when the presser, a journalist asked the American representative, "What are you going to do?" That was a very balanced reply. Basically, the reply was, "Listen, we're not going to get involved in it, but we hope our two friends solve this matter." That was it. But how do we solve it? For example, right now, Terry, there is an attempt from a Liberal Party MP, Sukh Dhaliwal, to reopen the Air India bombing investigation, which you have covered in detail. And they have done this investigation twice, and have categorically stated that the Khalistanis are the perpetrators of the crime. Now, how do you think India, and forget India, what do you think the Indo-Canadian community is supposed to feel when they keep on doing this, and these are Liberal MPs?
Well, first let's deal with that last point. Sukh Dhaliwal, the Liberal MP of some years standing, he's in, then he's out, and then he's voted back in, should be ashamed of himself for peddling this malicious claptrap about how we need to have a reinvestigation of who did the Air India bombing, to look into the very real possibility, he believes, that India blew up its own plane. Now, in case lots of people don't follow the details and they, it sounds interesting. Yeah, it does sound interesting, and I call it claptrap for a good reason, that there is a mountain of hard evidence showing that Air India was in fact blown up by the suspects that the RCMP had all along. One of whom has been convicted, by the way, 3 times by 3 different courts. That's Inderjit Rayat, the bomb maker who made the bombs for Tovinder Parmar, who arranged the tickets and the men to check in the bombs on 2 planes that were due to connect with Air India. So Sukh Dhaliwal peddling this as though this is a plausible theory after all of these years and all of this evidence which you simply ignored. He probably doesn't even know about it, hasn't bothered to read it. It's an abomination. And if I were an Indian, I would be appalled. And as a Canadian, I'm appalled that this idea is still being floated. But it gives you a sense of how far gone the situation is in Canada, that these crazy theories have currency even in the governing party, in the case of Suk Dhaliwal. So that's let's set that aside for a minute. Suk Dhaliwal, he's not ashamed of himself. I'm just saying he should be ashamed of himself. The question of how they get out of this is a tricky one, but I would propose to you, you can disagree if you like, that it's possible. Right now, it looks hardly possible, the charges going back and forth. But I think there is a way out. Consider, we have a report, I guess, from the Hindustan Times that Vikram Yadav has already been arrested. That's interesting because he was identified in the Washington Post as being the CC1, the intelligence official in New Delhi, who hired Nikhil Gupta, supposedly, to go out and find a hitman in New York to dispose of Gurpatwant Singh Pannoon of Sikhs for Justice. And Yadav, it is said in their article, has been confronted with local charges. In other words, not anything big international, but local charge, Indian charge, not Canadian charge. He isn't being dragged in front of a Canadian court or something like that. He isn't being sent to Canada to face trial and spend the rest of his life in jail as the author of an alleged murder plot. No, it's much more low-key than that, and it's going to be dealt with quietly. And this apparently seems to have been accepted by the American counterparts to the Indian team. They're meeting, they're discussing this, and action has been, however small you may think it, has been taken. So there is some movement there, and there may be more. What I mean is that the Americans have been more subtle, more sophisticated, and more discreet in their approach to this matter than the Canadians. I've already said that it's one plot. It's the same plot in Canada and the US, and saying that, oh, these are unrelated, as I often hear, is nonsense. It is one plot. I won't go into too much detail, but look at the US indictment. It's easy to Google online. Look at paragraph 6, look at paragraph 28. In both of those, Nikhil Gupta is quoted. They have him recorded saying it's that Nijjar is also a target of the plot against Pannoon. So it's one plot. Don't kid yourselves that this is two separate cases. So they have, in these two cases, considerable evidence accumulating. And I think what's going to happen is that a grubby little deal will be done. We've just look at what happened in the case of the prisoner swap with Russia. Well, I mean, it's pretty grubby. I mean, they're letting murderers out of jail in order to buy the freedom of Westerners in Russian prisons. And yeah, it is a dirty and grubby affair, but sometimes it's the best you can do. So I would surmise that there is a window of opportunity for both sides to do the minimum that's necessary, and that is to acknowledge their failures, both of them, which I've referred to earlier as their miscalculations. Canada needs to acknowledge that it has failed utterly to confront and to denounce the glorification of terrorist martyrs by Khalistanis. Canadian politicians need to stay away from those events. Canadians need to understand that Indian anger and to acknowledge that to a great degree it is justified. And by the way, there's no point in Canadians being moralistic about this and saying, "Oh yes, but murder is a terrible thing." Well, yes, it is. But check. Here's another Google for you. Google Justin Trudeau Twitter and Ayman al-Zawahri, who was assassinated by American Hellfire missile, to loud applause from Justin Trudeau. Tweeted, "Oh, this is a step towards a more peaceful world." He's applauding the extraterritorial assassination of an enemy of the United States. So it's okay when they do it, but it's not okay when the Indians do it. Of course, the Indians say they didn't do it, but we're dealing with politics here. So my point is that I think there is a way out whereby India, to some small degree, acknowledges responsibility. Now, of course, they will say that, oh, well, these were rogue elements. They got out of hand. They weren't sanctioned by anyone at the top levels of the Modi government, but we're going to take action and hold them responsible. That will buy peace with, at least with the Americans, and the Americans will say, okay, well, as long as you promise not to do it again. This is not how a rising superpower ought to behave. And Canada will tag along because Canada simply doesn't have the world clout, the geopolitical clout compared to India to stand apart from any deal that the United States chooses to make. And so then the Canadian government will be forced to accept that probably not much is going to be done about the Nijjar murder, that there will be these local charges, but nothing epic. And in conclusion, if the general outlines that I've sketched come to be, it may take a while. There are three other issues that I'd like to mention just very briefly, if I may. And they're all trials. These are very troublesome for the Indian side. Look out. If you're a patriotic Indian cheering the embarrassment, Trudeau is doing this for his own political survival. Trudeau is doing it as part of a plan to run down India. He's in cahoots with the CIA and all these conspiracy theories. Sorry, that won't wash. What's happening is, first, on November the 4th, the assassins of Rapudaman Singh Malik, prominent, wealthy suspect in the Air India case, who was acquitted in 2005. The assassination of Malik was the first of this round of assassinations. He was killed in Surrey. And there's a possibility, I guess, that he too was a target of Indian forces. Also, he was associated with organized crime. And he was wiped out a couple of years ago now, and that trial is coming to the fore. We don't know who paid. We know who the shooters were, or the RCMP say they know who the shooters were. A couple of white punks, gangsters, no personal animus with Rapudaman Singh Malik. They probably didn't know who the hell he was, but the money was good. And we don't know who paid them yet. Maybe they will want to bargain for a lighter sentence in return for a guilty plea and the revelation of who paid them. Maybe they don't even know who paid them. Second, the trial of Nikhil Gupta in New York. He is, again, the suspect, an Indian national who is suspected of hiring 4 young Indian origin gangsters who are now in custody and face charges of murder in the Hardeep Singh Nijjar case. And then there is going to be eventually another trial concerning the rest of this matter. We have Malik and Nijjar, and there's going to be a trial in the Malik, which will reveal details which currently are not in the public domain and which could be very embarrassing. It's going to be hard on the Indians when they are right now, for domestic consumption, I believe, trumpeting how Trudeau is an idiot and how dare they accuse India of these terrible things. But details will come out. The plot against Panun, the plot against Nijjar, and the plot against Malik, they may turn out to all be very embarrassing, 3 embarrassing cases for the Indian government. So there will be embarrassment aplenty for the Canadians. And the Indians are, of course, dishing it out right now, are they not? But there's more to come. And some of these details, I think, will not be welcome in New Delhi, but it's inevitable now.
Now, I just have two bits to add over here on the Ripudaman Singh Malik thing. People need to understand that Ripudaman Singh Malik was a former separatist who was directly involved in the Air India bombing, and he was later on could not be convicted because of lack of evidence. Now, Terry, you have reported this in your own reports of the botched up conspiracy, botched up things. I mean, CSIS may have had a mole in the Air India conspiracy. This was reported by the CBC. You've worked with the CBC on May 31st, 2003, and there were transcripts of an interview conducted by the RCMP with Ajay Singh Bagri after his arrest in 2000, and many things were let go, and many things were conveniently missed out. For the record, Ripudaman Singh Malik was on the blacklist. He was removed from the blacklist. Then he wrote a letter stating, it's good. Prime Minister Modi has removed the blacklist. And the moment he praised Modi, he was bumped off. And the Canadian media had reported that he was allegedly bumped off in a internecine gang warfare by the Nijjar group. It's not like Nijjar was Terry, we have to understand the optics of this. The Canadians come off as defending Hardeep Singh Nijjar, who forged documents 3 times, not once, not twice, but 3 times to come to Canada. And it's not like, I am making these stories up. People who are from Hardeep Singh Nijjar's camp, it's not like these are people that I am from, I belong to. Like, I want to play this clip. These are people who are pro Nijjar. They're like, here's the pro Nijjar person saying what Nijjar was doing.
Within Canada, his travel is restricted to nothing. Before it was limited, he was banned from the US, and then all of a sudden, outright, he can't travel. His travel ban was initiated. His home, I remember the day he came to my house with like this letter in his hand saying like, what does this mean? And I'm reading this letter, and it pretty much says that as in like you have 30 days to pay back mortgages, bank loans for his business. Basically, the financial institutions on instruction from Canadian security agencies is saying that you're a threat to the country. And he had to, within 30 days, come up with all this money to pay all these loans back because banks didn't want to do business with him. He was seen as a threat and a liability. He couldn't get credit cards for a while because everything was revoked. Like all those things that kind of were piling up on him from an actual physical form, not just the propaganda, which I'll just touch on quickly in a second. Beyond that, I know one of the things in the chat is posted. Interpol had multiple cases out on him. He was red corner Interpol multiple times, more than the 2 times that he was actually listed.
So I want to play one more thing, Terry. I'm not speaking about these things. These are people who are literally so-called allies of Nijjar. And when they're, he kind of forged documents 3 times. And then I think it was the 3rd time that he was allowed in Canada. And then they say that is some white settler colonialism that is doing. Like, what is Canada trying to justify? Canada is defending what? Hardeep Singh Nijjar? This is like America saying, let's say when America went and killed Osama bin Laden in Pakistan, the world didn't care. The world didn't care because he was Osama bin Laden. Everybody was honestly, if someone, Terry, do you think the average Canadian, if they found out the record of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, they're going to care? I mean, I'm being that blatant. Like, what are we fighting for? We're fighting for a man that even you have tweeted was part of the Khalistan Tiger Force, right? Terry, this is you tweeted.
Absolutely. And his supporters have very indiscreetly
this is your tweet.
Yes. Yeah. I tweeted too that yes, Nijjar was indeed a principal in the Khalistan Tiger Force, although they have a lion in their logo, and apparently they don't know the difference between a lion and a tiger, but never mind. The issue is that his supporters put up a poster of him as a martyr with the Khalistan Liberation Force logo on the poster, admitting the core allegation made against Nijjar by the Indian government, that he was fighting a war against India. So, but there are two issues here. One is everybody does it. Look at Osama bin Laden. Look at Justin Trudeau applauding the murder of Ayman al-Zawahiri, who, by the way, was Osama bin Laden's number 2. And he met his Hellfire missile too. And it's a matter of, yes, everybody does it. And everyone applauded the assassination, as you point out, frankly, of Osama bin Laden. Why not Nijjar? Here's the other side of that question. From Justin Trudeau's point of view, what he is doing is saying to Canadians that, look, I would be a very bad prime minister if I said to our intelligence agencies, okay, so, the Indians killed a terrorist. I don't care. Other countries can come into Canada and commit murder in Canada on Canadian soil of its enemies, and I'm not going to make a fuss about it. Now, is that the prime minister you want? Or do you think that he should stand on the principle of Canadian sovereignty? Now, that is a legitimate argument. I'm sorry, but Indians interpret that as defending Hardeep Singh Nijjar, as you put it.
I'm actually with you. That is a legitimate argument. I actually agree with you, which is why I've always stood by you to the chagrin of Indians who abuse me for being a Canadian toady. I actually agree with you. This is a legitimate argument.
Yes. And it is also a legitimate argument to point out that, yes, Trudeau did applaud the assassination of Zawahiri, and not that wasn't the only case. And yes, India's argument against Nijjar, apparently, according to his supporters, had some justification, didn't it? So we live in a difficult world where, and we're talking about a field in which, let's say, tactics that smell bad are common. We're dealing with a world in which prisoner swaps, clandestine murders, and assassinations do happen, and governments have over time become very highly skilled at concealing their tracks. But in this case, it's all busted. It's all going to bust wide open. We are going to see in New York, in a fair and independent court, a transparent process in which Nikhil Gupta will be tried and the FBI will be forced to take the stand and to testify to the evidence they gathered against Gupta of a plot, a so-called murder for hire plot, against both Patran Panun and Hardeep Singh Nijjar and other figures of the Khalistan and criminal underworld. And this is going to be, as I said earlier, embarrassing for India. So they will have to consider whether it will be better for the image of the government, if nothing else, to, as I said earlier, make a grubby little deal. Maybe that's the only way out. If somebody can suggest a better way out than my grubby deal scenario, then I'm happy to hear it. But at the moment, it's the best thing on offer. I mean, we can't go on like this. I mean, these are two. You made it clear at the outset, at the opening of this broadcast, that we're dealing about basically good countries. These are two democracies, and yes,
good people.
They're certainly imperfect. Canada would no doubt argue that India currently is even more imperfect than we are. But then the Indians would say, yeah, what about you? You've got Khalistanis is sometimes there in the cabinet, in the government. This is a disreputable organization. Anyway, so
yeah, but Terry,
there isn't a better thing on offer.
Yeah, but Terry, I have a question here. How does one expect anyone to take the Canadians seriously when, I think this was September 27th or something, when this was, I think, a CSIS brief, and this is something that the Canadians say, and I have never heard the Prime Minister even battling an eyelid about this. Do you understand why the Indians are not really willing to deal with Canada or anything? I mean, if you listen to things like this.
Of 6, we'll get to Pakistan. And essentially what it says here is that Pakistan conducts a range of foreign interference activities in Canada, which have included both attempts to interfere in elections and transnational repressions. Ms. Wood, do you have any context to add to that?
I think, Commissioner, what I would add there is the context that engagement of Pakistan is consistently in balance with trying to reduce the influence of India. And so some of the elements that I mentioned previously about the dynamics between suppressing voices can also have the opposite effect in terms of amplifying other voices. And in this particular case, influence of Pakistan is directly related to support of Khalistani extremism. So there's a different type of voice there. And yet it is also a more limited actor on the broader screens.
Give me some time, Terry, because it's very important that I share the context over here. Is that how does anybody expect Canada to be taken seriously and a deal to happen? And by the way, I was the one who reached out to you. I want this kerfuffle to end so that life can be normal, because there's so much trade at stake that people don't understand. But then, Terry, an organization you work for, with a lot of pride, and someone a lot of us look up to you, but when you see Gurpatwant Singh Pannu getting a 10 to 15 minute segment as a representative of the Six for Justice organization on the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, and then this is what they do as a video, and I have to play this video. This is Six for Justice. And it doesn't end right over here, Terry. They put a $500,000 bounty on an Indian diplomat. Now, after all of this, Terry, tell me, in which world, like, if people don't trust me, I'll share the image of the bounty too, because I don't want to be accused of making things up. Like, this is an open 500,000 bounty for tracking Sanjay Verma, the man who you saw on the screen, who they were firing bullets at. How does one solve this problem, Terry?
Well, what you do is what Canada has never done, and you approach this aggressively through law enforcement, and you charge people with fomenting hate. There is a law again in Canada against hate speech. If you put somebody's picture up and blaze away with bullets, as they did with the High Commissioner of India in Canada in that case, then there should be charges. And the fact that there haven't, I think it's an absolute disgrace. As a Canadian, I'm ashamed at the lackadaisical attitude that Canada has displayed to these kinds of displays for years. I'm talking about decades. This is not a recent development. It's just been tolerated. Remember, I mean, I'm very mindful of this kind of thing because I spent a lot of time covering the Air India trial. That the Indian government, before the bombing, 3 weeks before the bombing, warned Canada in explicit terms that there were multiple plots to sabotage Indian aircraft, that they would try to put a bomb in the luggage. They predicted exactly how it would be done, and they said we have to have meticulous baggage security to prevent this. This is urgent. You've got to act. You've got to make sure that they don't get away with this. And the RCMP looked at this and said, the Indians, they're always complaining about security. They just want more free security, and they shelved it. They didn't even give it to CSIS, and then they lied about it when the investigators came in. What happened to that? They said, oh, we gave it to CSIS. And CSIS said, oh, really? Funny, we didn't get it. So they lied about it. That's been for years the lackadaisical Canadian attitude. And the pictures you just showed, they're not new in Canada. Nor are they, by the way, new on the internet. I mean, Seeks for Justice has also published a video in which Pannoon is the star, and which showed they did the same thing to Captain Amarinder Singh when he was First Minister of Punjab. Showed a picture of him and then opened fire on the picture and drilled his face full of bullet holes. I mean, don't think that's just a Canadian thing. It's my point. Is it happens all over on the internet, and you can say that it should be stopped. Well, I would agree with you. I don't think that stuff should be. That's hate speech. It's fomenting and inciting murder. There's no way around it. So you're right to show this to people, and you're right to imply that Canada has been far too tolerant. So we need to put an end to that. I completely concede your point and agree with you.
I think the only pause, and I know you have to leave now, so I'll let you go now because I'm conscious of your time. I agree with you that the only sensible wiggle room out of this is going to be when both sides give some concessions. But to be very honest, the Canadian side has to have way more concessions, because whether we like it or not, whether it's it's not me. There are Canadian government reports that have suggested that the Canadian primary process has been hijacked by Khalistanis. We know that. We know that these things have happened in Canada. And the Khalistani influence on Canadian politics is just unbelievable. And once again, I want to remind people, it's not just the Liberals and the NDP, it's the Conservative Party too, ladies and gentlemen. And until and unless the disproportionate influence on the Khalistani network on Canadian politics, not on Canadian society, does not stop. Because Terry, they went after you by trying to sue you. People like me, we just have a bounty on our head, I guess, all the time because I'm brown. So, the strategy of the Khalistanis is very different. They beat the brown man up, they sue the white man. So here we are, two of us who are on the receiving line. And the only solution in this kerfuffle is, I think if Canada wants some concession from India, I think the only way out is Canada has to come so hard. Just like, I think it was day before yesterday, they banned another organization. And that too, the Canadians only banned it after the Americans told them to ban it. That's just the fact of the matter. When I don't know how to pronounce it. It starts with an S. It's an Islamist organization that has been banned now. Samidoun. And Indo-Canadians look at this, they're like, you don't ban Khalistani organizations, but you ban these. Well, if you have the principle for one, why don't you apply the same principle? And I think if they did that, I think the Indian government would give in to many of the things that you're suggesting.
There is much that Canadian politicians should do, and if Trudeau is indeed replaced, as it now appears he will be at the next election, by a new prime minister, that prime minister should be firmly instructed and firmly briefed by the intelligence agencies that, look, the time has come to cut the cord and say, no, we are not going to tolerate and smile and wave at your Vaisakhi parades while you worship terrorists. We're not going to have that anymore. However, we have to remember that it's a free speech country, and that it's not going to happen in any of the democracies. It's not going to happen in France or Germany or the UK, where there are so many Sikhs. It's not going to happen in the United States or in Canada. That governments are going to introduce laws banning things left, right, and center, not hard evidence. So can you show, for example, hard evidence that Hardeep Singh Nijjar committed any terrorist acts? Now, he apparently was a principal in the Khalistan Liberation Force. We've already discussed that. What exactly was the evidence against him? See, that isn't clear. In a free speech society, it's not. Indians are kidding themselves if they think that, why doesn't Canada do something about these terrible people and ban them? Well, are you going to ban somebody standing on the street with a yellow flag in Khalistan Zindabad? What harm has he done? So it's not easy to answer that and say, well, he's a threat to public safety. Oh, okay. Well, how exactly? When you come to trial, you may have a difficult time making a case against him that he was doing anything other than saying something you didn't like. in that case. So there are many complications that have to be overcome before Indians can say Canada must just ban everything and groups, because there has been a failure over time on the part of India to present Canada with evidence against the people they want to extradite, evidence to support what in India may require less support. In Canada, you got to go before a judge and a jury and have a transparent case where you really have to lay out hard evidence that somebody was a threat to public safety or was inciting violence, and that's not easy. Look at what they've published so far on the Indian side by way of an indictment against Gopal Singh Pannu, who was designated as a terrorist. What exactly has he done? Read the decision of Chief Justice Patel of the New Delhi High Court on the designation of Sikhs for Justice as a terrorist organization. Read that and tell me what's the hard evidence exactly that the government presented that Gopal Singh Pannu has actually done anything to blow up anything. He's connected to people who did bad things. Connected how exactly? I'm saying that there are complications, and it's not easy for Canada to say, okay, we're going to comply with Indian demands, and we're going to declare this person a terrorist, and the hell with the evidence. We don't need good evidence. Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
The only thing before I let you go, I would say is Gurpatwant Singh Pannu does not need any evidence. His own videos are evidence of what nonsense he spews.
I would agree.
I
think he indicts himself with his own videos.
He indicts himself, and as far as Hardeep Singh Nijjar and his connections to Khalistan Tiger Force, well, this is a video where they're actually putting his photo up in the Gurdwara, and guess what is written in the photo? Shaheed Jathedar Hardeep Singh Nijjar, Khalistan Tiger Force. Like, what more evidence do people need? His own people are calling him a leader of that. So, Terry, at the end of the day, we know what is happening in Canada, and it's petty vote bank politics that has destroyed Indo-Canadian relations. And I'm someone, if India is at fault, I would call India out very easily, but I honestly think this is just a mess that Canada has created for some odd reason. There are multiple reasons for that, but that's not something that we're going to do. But Terry, I know you have to go, so I'll let you go. But before I let you go, once again, thank you very much for coming. I'll take over the discussion from here. But once again, and hopefully we can have a conversation about something else in the future.
Well, you've indulged me in many long answers. I thank you for that.
All right. Take care, Terry. You have a good one.
Thank you.
Have a good one. All right. Take care. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'll continue. So before we go any further, I'll start taking the super chats later on, but I have to share a few more bits and bobs of evidence with you so that all of you are aware of the level of rubbish that the Canadian government has come up with. So as far as the leaks are concerned, these are the cases that the Canadian government wants to accuse India of. All right, these are the cases. So extortions in Edmonton that are investigated under Project Gaslight, where Jashandeep Kaur, Gurkaran Singh, Manav Heer, Parminder Singh, Divnur Ash, Maninder Singh Taliwal, and a minor were arrested. These are all murder of gangster Sukha Duneke in Winnipeg in 2023. He was a member of Bambia gang, and a rival Vishnoi gang took credit for the murder. Shooting outside AP Tillon's house, shooting outside Inderjeet Singh Gosal's house. And these are the ones apparently that have all been orchestrated by the Indian government. I'm sorry, this is so ridiculous. I don't even know how anyone can, even lend any sort of credence to these accusations that are given on behalf of the Canadian state apparatus. And as of now, you want to know the reason why Justin Trudeau does what he does. Well, just look at his popularity right now. As per the source of Abacus, on October 10th, 2023, by Canadian polling, this was a place where Justin Trudeau was going to wipe things, and he had wiped off this entire constituency in the last election. Look what is happening in Toronto. The Conservatives are going to win 20 seats. The Liberals are 1 and NDP is 3. That's how bad things are for Justin Trudeau. It's very important to share all this data with you on today's podcast, is because you should know what is happening. And these are not off the cuff things that I'm making up, or I'm pulling out of my ass. And as far as the Indian government is concerned, the Indian government has categorically denied all these accusations by the Canadian counterparts. On top of that, as if this was not enough, the Sikhs for Justice, they held a press conference, and in their press conference, they made this demand. They want Justin Trudeau to shut down every single consulate of India. Basically, they want the consulates. I think the tweet has mentions embassies. No, it's consulates, because we don't have the Vancouver and Toronto consulates of India have to be shut down, and they are demanding an investigation into MP Chandra Arya for espousing support for the Modi government. It's ridiculous, because Chandra Arya has actually been very critical of the Modi government on many occasions. Yes, like any normal government, you have members of parliament meeting prime ministers, and Khalistani intelligence is not known to be something. But just think about it. I say we should grant Khalistanis their wish. We should actually shut down the embassies. Everything should be shut down. Shut down the Indian consulates over here. Shut down the Canadian consulates, especially the Chandigarh consulate. Shut everything down. How about that? Let's give the Khalistanis what they want, and maybe then they will realize how much of a problem this will be. And just in the last 48 hours, this is Vishnu Som of the NDTV who has reported that after this entire shenanigan has been kind of come out, and there are 10 Indian flights, domestic and international, that are impacted by hoax bomb calls in approximately 36 hours. I wonder why this is happening. It's all part of the transnational repression, right? That India goes on doing. It's ridiculous to even suggest that something like this. And I'll keep on sharing more and more evidence with you, is because it's very important. It's very important that these things are shared. And again, Hardeep Singh Nijjar. Who is Hardeep Singh Nijjar? Why are we bothered about Hardeep Singh Nijjar? So this was the Globe and Mail report. One of the men said he attended arms training with Mr. Dhaliwal in 2015. The other man, a confidant of Mr. Dhaliwal's, was told in detail about the training. The two sources told the Globe that in all, 5 Orthodox Sikh men in their 20s and 30s, led by Mr. Nijjar, undertook weapons and GPS training, learned to communicate securely, and did target practice at 3 sites in Lower Mainland. This winter, the Globe spoke with 2 people close to Mr. Dhaliwal. They described him as gullible and fanatical in his support for Khalistan. At the time of his arrest, Mr. Dhaliwal was living in the basement of the Surrey home belonging to his sister, who sponsored his permanent residency. They said Mr. Dhaliwal, who was close to Mr. Nijjar, was planning to target leaders of Shiv Sena, a far-right Hindu sect linked to Mr. Modi's political party. Funny enough, Shiv Sena is now opposing Modi, so there you go. Whose leaders were attacked several times in Punjab that year. Assassinations on allied foreign lands are not ideal, but after Canada refused to extradite or even arrest him over a multi-year period, and the threat of further terrorism in India from Surrey, BC not abating, I can help imagine why some people might have taken this extreme step. These are comments from journalist V on Twitter in the end, the last bit I've read. But ask yourself, the Globe and Mail was reporting this about Hardeep Singh Nijjar. My question to an average Canadian is, this man was basically pretty much carrying out terrorist training camps and all sorts of crazy activities in Canada. You really want to destroy your relationship with India, a major trading partner of India, for this? And do you know what Khalistanis are known to do? Listen to Captain Amrinder Singh, a former premier or a chief minister of India, my dear Canadian listeners. Listen to what Captain Amrinder Singh said that Khalistanis have done. Listen to this.
Terrorists made some mistakes, which also helped us. They used to go into homes. They used to get the women there to prepare food for them, lay down their beds, and then they would rape their daughters. This was one thing which was spread through Punjab like wildfire and started turning the people against them. And then they did another thing. Whenever any wife or the person himself went shopping in town, the police officer, the NGO, whoever he was shot or she was shot. So that gave more courage to the Punjab police. And knowing the psyche of the Punjabi, Mr. Gill worked on that and eventually brought the force to a point where this terrorism was beaten back. And we lost a lot of people. Over 1,700 Punjab officers, Punjab police officers and men were killed. Over 30,000 Punjabis died during their operations, during terrorist operations, or caught in the crossfire, or whatever it was. But 30,000 did die. But Punjab got peace again, so never again.
I agree with the great Captain Amrinder Singh. Yes, never again. It's never again going to happen in India. But I don't know if that never again really applies to Canada. I don't know the way the Canadians are going. I don't know if I can really take them seriously. And as far as the clown in chief and his Khalistani minion, I don't even know what this means. So this is Jagmeet Singh.
More question.
I just want to say, Mr. Singh, forward.
You're
I
not
want to ask
answering.
about the sanctions that you want to put forward. How do you balance that against Canada's economic interests and suggesting severe sanctions when that would have potentially devastating effects in Canada's economy?
I thank you for the opportunity to clarify. I mentioned very severe sanctions on Indian diplomats.
Policy.
So given the fact, I mean, let's just take a moment. We got the RCMP that said that Indian diplomats were hiring criminal elements to shoot at Canadians. I can't see why we would do anything other than put in place severe sanctions on those diplomats, on Indian diplomats. The Modi government has to be held to account. And we all need to be unified as Canadian leaders. All of us have to be united in denouncing Modi and making sure we protect Canadians and put their safety first and foremost. Thank you so
I'm
much.
not saying whether or not you had personal threats.
What do you
I'm
make
not
of
saying
Indian
that.
name
You're
and you
leaving open that
personally?
assumption.
He's gone.
Also, that's still not how it works.
Yeah.
So imagine his own fellow Canadians, journalists of Canada, are laughing at this man. Yeah, how the hell does one sanction diplomats? Like, I don't understand. And as far as the RCMP is concerned, let's just say I don't have a very high opinion of the RCMP. This is what Candice Bergen-Harris, a former leader of the Conservative Party, has to say. Canadians deserve answers. It appears the Liberal government pressurized the RCMP to politically interfere in the Nova Scotia mass shooting police investigation. Liberals need to come clean and tell Canadians the truth. This cover-up cannot continue longer. And I want to play this clip. The RCMP, right? Let's play this clip.
I just want to take you for a moment to the now famous conversation with Commissioner Lucky that now Chief Superintendent Campbell made notes about, and Ms. Scanlon was in the room. People were upset. You were on that call, correct?
Yes, I was.
So my question to you is really a simple one. Did you come away from that call personally with the impression that there was political interference in the RCMP investigation of the mass casualty?
I did not come away from the call immediately feeling that. However, once I had the opportunity to learn more about the context, particularly of the lead up 24 to 48 hours, and reflect on, after I'd spoken to Leah Scanlon and Darren in particular, to learn more about the speaking point debate, we'll call it, in terms of what could and couldn't be in it. So to answer your question, not immediately. Subsequently, yes, when I gathered all the facts and had an opportunity to learn what had occurred in the in those final hours before that press conference of the 28th.
So then is it your evidence today that you're of the impression there was political interference?
That's my impression.
Obviously, RCMP has no political interference, right? Ladies and gentlemen, look what's happening over here. Obviously, there's no political interference. Canada is so squeaky clean, right? Canada does not do these shady deals, right? Political parties don't influence investigative agencies, right? Now, obviously, the average Indian is not supposed to know these things because the average Indian is not supposed to follow Canadian news. It is the job of folks like us, you know, who follow Canadian news, who are nerds, who do these things, who have friends across different places, who share these things with us. And, you know, we read Canadian news and we find these things out. Obviously, they're never going to talk about these things. But you need to ask yourself these serious questions. That how can this government just casually say things and get away with it? And you know, as far as Nijjar is concerned, I mean, just listen to this clip by folks who are sympathetic to Nijjar.
But I did want to touch on all of that. And I wanted to mention one thing here. There's some horrible, as expected, reporting that goes on around Baji's death. But one of them was around this idea of how he arrived in Canada. You know, this refugee status and these false refugee claims, and you know, he was, you know, like us, and we sent in responses to some of those media outlets and things like that, just questioning the whiteness of these conversations. That you came here hundreds of years ago, raping, pillaging, and plundering this land, and you're going to talk to us as we seek our sovereignty and and limit this guy's entire life to a refugee claim you think went bad.
Really? You're going to fall to whiteness as a claim? The man was carrying out training ops for terrorist camps. And that's your defense? This is your defense of Hardeep Singh Nijjar? And honestly, this quote from the Honorable Minister of External Affairs of India, I think this is exactly how the Indo-Canadian relationship can be summarized.
The phrase which came to my mind was actually a Hindi phrase, which was Ulta Chor Kotwal Ko Dante. I mean, if anybody has a complaint, we have a complaint about Canada. You know, what I said earlier, the space that they're giving to Khalistanis and to violent extremists. So I was very perplexed by what I heard.
I completely agree with the Honorable External Minister of Affairs of India. This is a classic case of Ulta Chor Kotwal Ko Dante. Bhaiya terroristo ko tum rakhte ho. गलत काम तुम करते हो और उसके बाद तुम बोलते हो हाय हाय इंडियंस ने ये कर दिया. अरे इंडियंस ने क्या किया? एविडेंस तुम नहीं देते हो कुछ. They don't provide anything. They just say trust me bro, and then Lawrence Bishnoi is hired by the Indian government. This is the latest thing I've heard. यार और कोई काम नहीं है, उसे बाबा सिद्दीकी को उधर टपका दिया 3 दिन पहले. और हाँ भाई इंडियंस और लॉरेंस बिश्नोई को उठा के बैठे हुए हैं जैसे इंडियंस को और कोई काम नहीं है. But the crux of the issue is, what are we going to do? Even Melanie Jolie had said, right, that, sanctions are very much on the table because, you know, the Canadians like to keep on pumping their, you know, chest out and they keep threatening Indians all the time. And seriously, I just don't understand what the Canadian government is thinking they're going to achieve out of this entire process. Because if the Canadians think they can bully India, I mean, they can pagal ho kya? How do you expect to bully India? India is not going to get bullied. Look at how the Americans are behaving, and the Americans are behaving in a very responsible way. They share actual actionable evidence and the Indians act immediately. What are the Canadians doing other than fluff and bluster? And this is another example of fluff and bluster.
The NDP are calling for more severe action. You've expelled diplomats, but they're saying sanctions are warranted given the severity of the allegations leveled today. Is the federal government considering sanctions against India? And if it's not sanctions, what other steps are you considering taking?
So today was a really important step. When you look at what is available in our toolbox, expulsing diplomats is one of the highest level, you know, the highest and the toughest measure that a country can take under the Vienna Convention. For the rest, we'll continue to push India to make sure that they cooperate. We'll continue to engage with our Five Eyes partners. We'll continue to engage with also all our G7 partners, and everything is on the table.
Next
Thank you.
question.
Her exact words were, everything is on the table. So the Canadian foreign minister, who's the equivalent of the external affairs ministry, Jaishankar in India, is saying that they are actively looking at trade sanctions on India. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I remember that वो क्या था यार, वो अरविंद केजरीवाल ने वो क्या बोला था ना, वो अरविंद केजरीवाल ने एक बार हमारी असेंबली में बोला था, मुझे याद है, अरविंद केजरीवाल ने. I sincerely believe that is the only answer any sane Indian can give to the Canadians right now. If they say they want to put sanctions on India, I think any sane Indian should go to them and say, तो कर ना, कब से बैठे हैं, उसी के इंतजार में हैं, कर सैंक्शन, बंद कर काउंसुलेट, हम वहां बंद करते हैं, फिर रिस्पांस में लगा यहां पे ट्रेड सैंक्शन, थक गए हैं हम. लेट्स शेयर सम ट्रेड डिटेल्स फॉर यू. ये लोग बोलते हैं ना इनको ट्रेड नहीं करना इंडिया से, जरा ट्रेड की डिटेल्स शेयर करता हूं मैं आप लोगों के साथ. डेक दिखाता हूं आपको पूरा, ताकि आपको भी पता चले. ठीक है, दिस इज द एंटायर इंडिया कनाडा डेक. मेरी शक्ल देखने की जरूरत नहीं है, इसके लिए मैंने हटा दिया है. दिस इज द एंटायर India Canada deck. This is in 2022 they did exports of $4.32 billion to India, out of which 1 billion was coal briquettes. The rank is 9 out of 215. India exported $5.37 billion. The rank is 28 Canada का. I repeat, मैं कह रहा हूं, मैं अपने कैनेडियन काउंटर पार्ट्स को कह रहा हूं, आपको सैंक्शंस करनी है पक्का? आर द कैनेडियंस श्योर? बिकॉज मतलब, आर द कैनेडियंस रियली श्योर दैट दे वांट टू डू दिस? This is my question to each and every well-meaning Canadian, because अगर हम इंडियंस हैं तो हमारा तो माँ कसम, मेरे को तो अभी लग रहा है कि इंडियंस का तो करना एक ही रिस्पॉन्स हो सकते हैं. इंडियंस का तो यही रिस्पॉन्स हो सकता है, तो करना. परेशान हो गए हम लोग 2.5 साल से, ये भी परेशान हो गए, हम भी परेशान हो गए. करो फिर, हमारी पावर है, हमारी पावर है. जब तक हम कह रहे थे करो 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 करो, तो कह रहे थे तुम करो. आज हमने कर दिया तो कह रहे हम करेंगे, तो करो ना भाई, क्यों नहीं कर रहे? I think that's the answer every Indian should give. Seriously. I'll take your questions and I'll leave then. Let's start from the first one. Well, Nijjar Mishra, thank you very much for becoming a member. Why has there not been a backlash to Khalistanis by the wider Canadian polity when it is a front for other criminal activities as well? Chaitanya, that's a very good question. When I used to live in India, even I used to think कि ये क्या लोगों को समझ में नहीं आता है. But believe me, that average person does not care. But now what has happened is, because it has become such a pain in the ass, that the average Canadian has changed their stance. And don't believe me, there are Angus Reid है शायद इंस्टीट्यूट का नाम. They do regular mood of the nation polls and check different communities and their popularity ratings over a period of time in Canada. You will get your answer. I thank Canadian government for outsourcing our civil war in their soil and preventing internal conflict in India. Do you think Bangladesh will be Khalistan? No, I don't think so. Any Khalistan is happening anywhere. Believe me, this is just a pipe dream of the Khalistanis, and the Liberals and the NDP are playing sinister vote bank politics, and they will regret it very much. Somebody said, is Mr. Milewski saying that the gangsters who oft Nijjar operated in Canada with Indian approval when India requested their extradition so many times? Well, that's something that Terry has to figure out, because honestly, this entire Bishnoi was an Indian agent angle is so ridiculous that I don't even know what to say about it. So someone has said, as a Hindu living in Canada, I support India but love Canada. Listen, that's pretty much everyone. They love Canada, they love India, and I don't know what they're supposed to do. Kapil Goenka says, two Air India planes had to make emergency landings due to Khalistani threats. They have infiltrated conservatives also. Canada is a state sponsor. Why should India accept anything? Listen, I don't know why should India accept anything either. Because if the Canadians are not going to give any actionable evidence, I agree, the Indians should not accept anything. And again, on the Conservative Party bit, I completely empathize with you. And I once again want to take this opportunity to remind each and every one of you, if these faces of the Conservative Party are going to be the ones negotiating with India when the eventual change of power happens, look at these four faces. I can guarantee you nothing is going to change. It's just going to be the old wine in a new bottle. मैं आपको सच कह रहा हूं, अगर ये चार चेहरे हुए तो घंटे का कुछ नहीं होना. कसम से आके कह रहा हूं, घंटे का कुछ नहीं होना. कितने भी एफर्ट कर लेना, कितने भी जतन कर लेना, कोई कुछ नहीं होने वाला. कुछ भी नहीं बदलेगा. कुछ नहीं बदलने वाला. So someone said, so is a Hellfire missile okay? No, nothing is okay, but abhi kya bole? Why is the RCMP allegedly claiming pro-Khalistanis are attacked, but PM and NDTV leaders are trying to provoke it by saying Canadian South Asians are under threat, diversion? I don't know. You have to ask them. And nobody asks the right questions in Canada. The Canadian journalism has reached an all-time low. Where, I mean, when you have Hardeep Singh Nijjar being, presented as a Sikh community leader on Canadian National Broadcasting Corporation, I mean, क्या रह गया यार? आप मेरे को एक बात बताओ ना, हरदीप सिंह निज्जर, क्या 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 रह गया है अभी? कुछ बाकी रह गया है? निज्जर आ गया Canadian TV पे. Tell me, how are we supposed to respond to anything? And I'm not gonna show his photo right now because he doesn't deserve it. Will Indo-Canadian relations affect the Hindu Heritage Fest? That is my only worry because I'm in Bangalore right now. No. The Hindu Heritage Festival is going to go on as we had planned. And in fact, I would love to play a video for all of you from the Hindu Heritage Festival right now. Apao, everybody should come. We are going to go ahead as planned.
I'm Rajiv Malhotra from Infinity Foundation in Princeton. I'm delighted that I'll be attending the Hindu Heritage Festival organized by Sangeeta Iyer, a dear friend. She's a great filmmaker. She's making some documentaries about our foundation. So I look forward to seeing all of you and having a lot of fun.
So, like I said, all of you, if you want to join us on the 9th of November, feel free to come. As you see, the details are on the screen right now. You can scan the QR code and register yourself. If you do not register and share your details, we are not going to let you in the hall. So don't tell me udhar aa gaye, अरे मैंने register नहीं किया. Register नहीं करोगे, आने को नहीं मिलेगा. Categorically कह रहा हूं, if you do not register, you cannot come. And we've not even announced the entire guest list till now. You have no idea. Amazing guests are coming. And believe me when I say you guys are not going to regret coming over there. Even if you're from New York and all those areas, just drive down or fly out to Toronto. You're not going to regret this one. You're going to have so much fun. We're going to have Hindu cultural events. We're going to have talks. We're going to have dances. We're going to have a great time. We'll have Indian food. It will be amazing. So somebody says, Canadian politicians do not care about Khalistani terror as Khalistanis do not attack the regular white folks. We have not banned the Proud Bows in India as we don't care. Well, yeah, that is one of the reasons. Demanding Khalistan is freedom of expression, but Khalistanis threatening diplomats, airlines, pelting stones and consulate, does that qualify for freedom of expression in Canada? It doesn't. And that's what Terry Milewski was saying, that it's shameful that Canada is letting it happen. That's exactly. Can we request Khalistan to start from Jastinder's properties, charities, begin at home? Well, you can ask Jastindra. And you know what? The funniest thing was, यार मतलब इतने वाहियात लोग मैंने मेरी लाइफ में नहीं देखे. Somebody literally said that kushalmehra calling Justin Trudeau Jastinder is anti-Sikh. Oh यार मतलब मैं वो let me channel my Pakistani YouTuber in. ओ खुदा का खौफ करें, यहां पे लोग रहते हैं जो अपने आप को जस्टिंदर खुद बुलाते हैं, और मैं उसको जस्टिंदर बुला रहा हूं, मैं एंटी सिख हो गया हूं. जस्ट गूगल करो जस्टिंदर XYZ इन नॉर्थ अमेरिका और इतने सारे जस्टिंदर मिलेंगे तुमको. यार कुछ तो शर्म करो यार, मतलब खालिस्तानियों, तुमको मेरे को अक्यूज करना है, कम से कम कुछ तो अच्छा एक्यूजेशन दो. Khalistanis thrive in the West as they do not attack the white folks. However, they do align with Islamists. CCP and anti-India elements who also happen to be anti-West are a threat to the West in the long run. Well, क्या करूं मैं तो कुछ नहीं कर सकता भाई, आप अपने politicians को समझाओ यहाँ के. Is this crisis being made worse by Trudeau's personal dislike of Modi and general in India? Even if India did it, could he have been gently handed? I don't think so. That is entirely untrue. I think Trudeau is a malignant narcissist, and I think this would have been handled far better if Trudeau was not in the helm of affairs. How can USA create problems for India by sanctions? I mean, listen, Americans are not going to bother beyond a point. We just signed a $3 billion deal with them. You think America is going to jeopardize their trade with India over these punks? Well, yeah, right. Trudeau has inherited property in Cuba. If you know, you know. I don't know. Whatever this is, make Khalistan there with Trudeau as the leader. Yaar, jisko jo karna hai kar lo. Anyways, I think I have answered all your questions. Yeah, so I'll wrap up today's podcast over here, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, before we wrap it up, again on the screen of your on your screen of your phone, tablet, TV, wherever you're watching, do come and join us on the 9th of November for the first ever Hindu Heritage Festival of Canada. Like I said, you're going to have books, talks, dance. We're even going to give away awards for contribution to Canada, and not just of people of Indian origin, people of different ethnicities are going to be awarded and celebrated by the Hindu community of Canada. I sincerely hope you guys turn up in and around this area if you are near this area. And if you want to support the work I am doing, and if you want to support the Cārvāka podcast, my humble request to you is do consider joining the membership program of the Cārvāka podcast. I consciously stay away from advertisements. I want to be the one podcaster of India that only has members who give me small amounts monthly, and I am fiercely independent that way. So if you really want me to be fearless, please join my membership program. Whether you join it on Patreon or on YouTube, it doesn't matter. If you want to send one-time donations, you can send them both in India and Canada. In India at kushalmehra at ICICI. In Canada at kushalmehra81@gmail.com through Interact. If you want to buy Cārvāka podcast merchandise, go to kushalmehra.com/shop or go to Kadak Merch. You can buy the merchandise there. If you can't do any of that, like this video. That also helps this tremendously. Subscribe to my channel. Leave a comment in the comments section. If you're an audio listener, just leave a rating on your favorite audio platform. And also, if you have not done this, can you go and buy my book? Meri book Amazon pe available hai, whether it's in Canada, whether it's in America, whether it's in India. My book name is Nastik, Why I Am Not an Atheist. And if you've not bought my book, I would urge all of you to go buy my book too and leave a rating on Amazon too. I'll see you guys next time. Once again, thank you very much for tuning in. Take care.